This episode of the Amateur Traveler podcast is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from the smart people at NerdWallet. From choosing the right travel card to dodging hidden fees, Smart Travel helps your money go further. Literally. They cover all things travel finance, including the smartest ways to book flights without playing the guess the cheapest day game, how to avoid paying for upgrades you won't use, when to book peak season trips without paying peak season prices, and how to maximize points for real savings, not just free bottled water. So they cover all the stuff we don't. And there's a reason for that. I don't know these subjects as well as the smart people at NerdWallet do. So if you're looking for information about financing your travels, check out Smart Travel. Travel smarter and spend less with the help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks to Smart Travel and NerdWallet for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Cooler days call for layers that last, and Quince is your go-to for quality essentials that feel cozy, look refined, and won't blow your budget. You've heard what I like at Quince, but I've talked to friends. Mignon really loves the ladies' linen pants that even have pockets. And Gary also recommends some of the bedding, which I haven't tried yet. Think about their $50 cashmere sweater, premium denim that fits like a dream, and luxe outerwear that you wear year after year. These are the pieces that'll turn into your fall uniform. Because Quince partners directly with top-tier ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen, they deliver luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. What Quince pieces have become staples in your fall wardrobe? Let me know. Quince has really become a one-stop shop. Are there a few pieces you've been reaching for lately, whether it's your closet, kitchen, or around the house? Find your fall staples at Quince. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 966. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about locks, parks and trails, First Nations, Winnie the Pooh, and the Edmund Fitzgerald as we do a road trip across the northern shore of Lake Superior in Ontario. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Lake Superior. I'd like to welcome to the show David Adler, traveler and part-time YouTuber, and I'll put a link in the show notes to his YouTube page. And David has come to talk to us about a road trip in the north shore of Lake Superior. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me here. I've been excited to share this unique journey with you.
What is your connection to the north shore of Lake Superior? That's a somewhat off-the-beaten-path destination here.
Yeah, so I've spent a couple summers up there. I was a camp counselor there for 2 summers, working at an outpost camp just outside of a town called Wawa, Ontario, which is about 4 hours north of Sault Ste. Marie. And this is a camp mostly for high schoolers, so kids going into their sophomore and junior year. And it's an outpost camp, so very rustic, no running water, no electricity. And the whole purpose is to really go on these camping trips. So we did 8 days hiking on Lake Superior, 4-day sea kayaking on Lake Superior as well. We've done a little front country trip. We went to Thunder Bay and got more of a town and day hiking experience. Then it's really this rustic experience for these kids. It's associated with a camp which is down in Michigan, where I grew up originally in Metro Detroit, called Tamarack Camps. And I went there as a camper, attended this outpost camp when I was a high schooler, really fell in love with it. And then when I was 17, 18 years old, I worked as a counselor up there and really got familiar with the space. And it's very remote. There's not a lot of information out there. And really getting to know that area of Canada was really fascinating. And I actually had the privilege of going back there just this past month with my family. I took my immediate family and my girlfriend and showed them around that area for about 2 days. It's always great to go back there. And I really love the pristine wilderness up there.
Okay. Well, why should someone go to this part of Ontario?
I think what makes it really unique is that it's a place that no one really knows about. And I think it stands as one of the most beautiful spots in the world that I've ever seen. The nature there is really untouched. You'll be driving and there'll be signs that say no gas for 150 kilometers. It's very remote. And honestly, when you drive, and I'll talk about this later, but the road trip that I think is a great way to get familiar with the area is starting in Sault Ste. Marie, which is right
Okay.
where Lake Superior starts. It's in the border town with Michigan. There's two Sault Ste. Maries, the Canadian side and the Michigan side. And it meets right where Lake Huron / Lake Michigan meet the waters of Lake Superior, separated by the St. Mary's River. And then all the way on the other end, you have Duluth, Minnesota. That's the corner of Lake Superior as well. So this huge area. And the route that I'm most familiar with and I think is great, you'll be following along Highway 17 from Sault Ste. Marie to Thunder Bay. And between those two towns, which are about around 100,000 people, maybe 200,000 people at most, the biggest town between that is Marathon, which is 3,000 people. So we're talking really remote. And with that remoteness comes nature that you've never seen before. Lake Superior is crystal clear blue water. It's very cold, I will say, if you go swimming in it, but it feels amazing. I wouldn't necessarily endorse this, but if you know what you're doing, you can just scoop up the water and drink straight from it. It's that clean. And you can look straight down. I think they say that looking down Lake Superior, 36 feet is the same visibility as 6 feet in Lake Erie. So it is really clear out there and really fresh.
Okay. Excellent. You're starting us in Sault Ste. Marie. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I definitely would recommend starting in Sault Ste. Marie. Like I mentioned, this road trip can start from Sault Ste. Marie and end in Thunder Bay. You could do the reverse, but I think starting in Sault Ste. Marie gives you the best time and allows you to extend the trip further along the shore of Lake Superior if you would like. Sault Ste. Marie also is pretty accessible. You can fly there from local Canadian airports. Toronto has direct flights, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, I think some other locations around the area. If you do want to come from the States, you can drive if you would like from Michigan. It's only about 45 minutes from the Mackinac Bridge, which connects the upper and lower peninsula of Michigan. And if you really want to find a bigger city, it's about a 4-hour drive from Detroit.
Okay.
So in Sault Ste. Marie, you'll get there, and depending where you come from, may not feel like the biggest of town, but by the end of the trip, you'll come back. And I know I've done this, spending 6 weeks in the wilderness of Canada. You come back and you have this culture shock of a big town feel. But it's a nice, charming town. It's got a lot of history. I think it's one of the oldest towns in the area, set up by the French for fur trade that happened in the region. A big part of the industry there is shipping. So the Soo locks, which are built to have ships come from Lake Superior into the Lake Huron. You can do a tour of those locks. Both the Canadian and American side offer tours. They're around $50 for a tour of the locks. You get on a boat and you can travel through the locks and experience them going up and down, which is really nice. Additionally, in Sault Ste. Marie, there's a nice historical site for the actual canals and the history, the importance of the fur trading routes that are in the area. And honestly, some of the really unique things that you get out of that area is some of the cuisine and food. So in this area of Canada, you have an interesting fusion of historical British influence from the colonial era, along with the French influence as well. A large amount of Ontario's French-speaking population lives up there. So don't be surprised if you hear French, especially in the more remote parts. Along with Ojibwe culture is really prevalent. So a lot of that area of Canada has significant sites for the Ojibwe people, along with naming and cultural sites that the parks and other areas are trying to preserve and keep intact. And we'll touch upon in a second later on about the park services that are trying to mend the relationships between the local tribes and the tourism industry. You get a hybrid of all of that. In Sault Ste. Marie, I definitely think, like in most of Canada, you find poutine, which is a great staple. You'll find a lot of poutine in this area from that French-Canadian influence. But even some more local foods like pasties are a meat pie. I'm not sure. Pasties? Yeah, I think it's pasties.
Yeah, it's pasties. It's a Cornish dish originally.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of the miners in that area of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan into Canada would use that for food to take into the mines. So you can get some pasties, which is like a meat pie out there.
Yeah, in Cornwall, the reason why pasties came about is you could hold them by that seam and eat them, and you could throw away that seam then because your hands were covered with tin, which would be toxic. And so the idea was that even though your hands are covered with toxic metal, you can have your lunch but not worry too much about getting all that tin off necessarily.
Wow. Okay, I did not know that at all. That's really interesting. I will say the mining industry is not as much as it is, so you probably can eat the rim of it now.
As long as you haven't been
But
down in the mines, I think you're fine.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, you'll find a lot of those kind of foods. The old mining industry, the French can influence some local Ojibwe cuisine you may find here and there. So Sault Ste. Marie is going to be your place to get that
And
the
do you
more
have an
cultural experience.
example of local Ojibwe cuisine?
I personally have not experienced that because a
Okay.
lot of my time up there was cooking at campsites, and I don't think I had enough ingredients and knowledge to really cook a true authentic cuisine out on a
Okay.
campsite. But I do know you can find some opportunities in some of the First Nation sites that they serve some food.
Okay. Anything else we want to see in Sault Ste. Marie before we hit the road?
The only other advice I give is that if you plan on doing some camping, the areas that you'll be going to are pretty remote. You'll have some small towns here and there. But if there's any unique camping gear or groceries or special food items, you'll find them in towns scattered throughout. But this is the place to stock up. If you're doing an RV trip, if you're going backcountry camping, use Sault Ste. Marie as your launching point to start that off because the next town of that size is not going to be Thunder Bay, which will be at the end of your trip.
Okay.
So moving on from Sault Ste. Marie, you'll start on Highway 17. This is pretty much your lifeline of this road trip. So there's one road and one highway that stretches across Lake Superior. It's part of the Lake Superior Circle Tour. So if you see signs in the US or in Canada that mention that, it's one big unit, and you can find more information on that online. If you look up the Lake Superior Circle Tour, you can find information about roadside attractions, accommodations, food, camping services, and all that, which is really helpful. And Highway 17 is the only road. So if there is an accident or a closure, expect there to be traffic or to have to be adjustable with your plans because
Yep.
there's no other detours. So I know when I was working at the summer camp one summer, there was an accident on the highway and we had to just spend the night and leave the next morning for them to clear it out. So just be prepared, especially if the weather is not great. I've only been in the summertime, but I know the winters are very brutal. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going up there for the wintertime, but if you are, just be aware of what you're getting yourself into when it's just one highway is all that is accessible for you.
Okay.
Speaking of getting around transportation, I will also note that I recommend this to be done as a road trip, but two other unique alternatives that people could be interested in that I want to share is one, there's cruise ships. So through Viking Cruise, they have a Great Lakes tour. I think there's two of them.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in that tour. I think it'd
Yeah.
be really cool.
Yeah, and I know they go through Lake Superior and they stop in Thunder Bay and see some
Mm-hmm.
of the sites around there. I think they either go to Duluth and some other spots on Lake Superior. So if you're looking for something on the water and maybe a little bit all packaged together, those cruises look like an amazing option. So I definitely recommend looking into that. The second, more unique form of transportation, I will say, and you'll see this especially if you come in the summertime, is people who bike the Trans-Canadian Highway. So these are cyclists, not motorcycles, cyclists.
Yep.
And they go across all of Canada. And they're pretty easy to spot because you're in the middle of nowhere and you got someone on a bicycle. It's pretty surprising. But they usually carry some form of camping gear and such. And when I was a counselor, if we ever passed a cyclist on the bus driving around the area, we would all open the windows, give them a big thumbs up and cheer them on because I can only imagine what a journey that is to take many months to go across all of Canada in some of the most rugged terrain. So those are two different alternatives for transportations that I will throw out there. But this really, I think, is done best by car to really take your time and go hike and explore some of the more remote sites and visit some of the small, unique towns on the way.
Okay.
So first stop after you leave Sault Ste. Marie and you get on Highway 17, you'll come across two bays and provincial parks. Those are Batchewana Bay and Pancake Bay, respectively. These are great spots to stop by. A lot of the real scenery will open up further in a drive, but there's some cool spots to pull over and take a look at some of the homes, little cottages on Lake Superior. There's also a spot called Edmund Fitzgerald Lookout, which some people might be familiar is the famous shipwreck that happened in Lake Superior with the Gordon Lightfoot song, the song that talks about that shipwreck. And there is a point where you can overlook and see the beginning of Lake Superior. And even though you can't see the shipwreck itself, but you can see the area of water that's between Whitefish Point in Michigan to the Canadian side of Batchewana Bay. And that's where the wreck happened. So there's a nice lookout out there, and they have a plaque, some information about the shipwreck. And I will say, if you're interested in shipwreck history, Lake Superior is the place to be. It is notorious for its brutal winds and storm patterns that can come out of nowhere. There are over 350 known shipwrecks that lie beneath Lake Superior. And some of them I'll talk about, you can get a chance to even see yourself. But there's a really fascinating history about the shipping corridors of Lake Superior throughout this journey.
Now, the lookout is a lookout trail, it looks like. So I'm going to have to park the car and walk about 6 miles or something like that. Sorry, 6 kilometers.
Yes. I will also add that I may use kilometers and miles. As an American myself, I'm used to the imperial system, but being in Canada there for so long, a lot of the things that I know in my head are in kilometers. So
Yep.
I definitely might use that interchangeably. But yeah, a lot of these spots that I recommend, if it's a hiking spot or a waterfall or even a lookout, will require you to park the car, go on a little short trail or hike, and then you'll be there. Some of them are just pull over at the car, but with the remoteness comes a little bit of a journey, but nothing too strenuous that isn't for the average traveler on a road trip. So once you get past Batchewana Bay and Pancake Bay, this is really one of my favorite parts of the entire area of Lake Superior. This is Lake Superior Provincial Park. This park is a huge area. It's one of the larger provincial parks in Ontario, but it's pretty accessible by car. Highway 17 goes right through the park and takes you all the way up to Wawa. It takes probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get through the entire park, but it has some of the most amazing hiking sceneries, historical and cultural places to visit. You could spend your entire week's road trip here, but I definitely would recommend spending 2-3 days in Lake Superior Provincial Park. You could use Wawa as a home base if you want to stay in a motel or a hotel, or you can go camping. There are a lot of front country camping spots or backcountry camping spots as well if you want to stay in a more rustic way.
Were there particular trails that you were recommending?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you first enter the park, I would really recommend going to the visitor center. If you're coming from Sault Ste. Marie, it's going to be one of the first spots entering the park. So definitely check out the visitor center. They have a really great museum section that talks about the history of the region, the industry that used to be there, the local First Nation tribes, and the mythology and legends that they have of the region. And it also is a great place to get an idea of what kind of hiking and what kind of camping you want to do in the park. There are 3 directions you can take your camping and your exploration of the park. The first one is day hikes. So in the park, there's a lot of trails that are accessible by car. So one of my favorite and one that the park would probably recommend to you is Orphan Loop. Orphan Lake Loop is a 4-mile loop of the park where you'll start off the highway, you'll pull over and you'll hike through a river in the forest, and then you'll reach Orphan Lake with an overlook of Lake Superior, and then you end right on the shores of Lake Superior where you can go swimming on the beach and get beautiful views of Lake Superior, and then you loop on back to the parking lot. So it's about 4 miles. You get a good diversity of terrain between being in the woods, you get some lakes, some rivers, and then ultimately on the beach of Lake Superior. So I think it's a really good way to experience all of that.
If you're looking for a way to travel that feels personal, comfortable, and connected, but without the price tags and sterile feeling of hotels or short-term rentals, let me introduce you to Kindred. Kindred is a members-only home swapping network, and your home with Kindred is your ticket. You earn credits by hosting fellow members and then use those credits to stay in over 220,000 homes in more than 100 cities worldwide. I haven't had a chance to try it yet. We just got this ad come in recently. But like me, you can get 5 nights of travel credit just for signing up. I quickly got on the app and looked for places near where my son lives because they don't have room for us to stay with them, and found a number of places nearby. Some of them are available to book specific days because remember, this is a home exchange, and so that's when those people are going on vacation, and others are open to inquiries. There are pictures of all these places, and all look nice, by the way, and then descriptions of the property as well. Apply now at livekindred.com and use code TRAVELER to join for free. Plus, you'll earn 5 nights of travel credit just for signing up. That's livekindred.com, code TRAVELER. livekindred.com, code TRAVELER. And thanks to Kindred for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
The detective said missing kids usually come home. What happens when they don't?
Based on a true story.
Police looking for John Gacy.
We discovered bodies. By the looks of it, they're younger men.
The things he did to those kids. He's sick.
The system failed these families.
Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Do you know how many there are?
Up to you to find out.
Some of my personal favorites that are also good alternatives or other options for day hikes is Nokomis, which is near the northern end of the park. So at the north end of the park is Old Woman Bay, which is a beautiful spot that I highly recommend you pull over and check out. It's got this bay of Lake Superior with these cliffs and bluffs right on the shore of the lake. And you can stop there and go swimming and check it out. They call it Old Woman Bay because when you look from the shore from a certain angle, you can see the profile of a woman's face. I've also been told that when you go kayaking or canoeing, it's best seen on the water. But it's really striking to see such steep cliffs and really big mountainous terrains, especially coming from the Midwest and that region. It really shows the Canadian Shield and some of the ruggedness of the terrain. So the Nokomis Trail is just across the road from the parking lot of Old Woman Bay. And that's a short little day hike where you hike up to a hill that overlooks the entire bay, and that area can only take you around a couple hours to do. So it's pretty accessible and a well-maintained trail.
Okay.
The second way you could really explore the park is backcountry camping.
Mm-hmm.
So the park's most famous trail is the Coastal Trail. This trail is, I will warn people, very rugged and very rigorous. You are bouncing between two different styles of trails. One where you're in the woods following this blue diamond sign that marks the trail, and you're going through rocks in a little bit more of a rugged, wooded environment. The second half style of the trail is called rock hopping, where you are going from big boulders, sandy beaches, somewhere in between. They're called ankle breakers because they're not big enough where they're fully stable for your foot, but not small enough where it feels like sand. And you can lose footing and lose your balance really easily. So even though this trail is only 40 miles long, it's recommended to take 5 to 7 days. When I led the trip on this trail, it took us 7 nights, 8 days, because it's really strenuous and you really got to take your time, be careful. If it's raining, I definitely would discourage people to go on this trail because the granite rock along the shore can be slippery like ice and can be really tough to hike in. This trail is absolutely beautiful, and I really recommend it. It's some of the most rewarding hiking I've ever done, but it definitely comes with its advanced terrain and caution to do.
Okay.
Of that trail, you can still do portions just for the day, which is probably my best recommendation. The southern half of the Coastal Trail follows close to the highway. The second half of the trail goes away from the highway, and it's a little less accessible. Some really great spots that I recommend if you want to do it just for the day is Catherine's Cove is a great pull-out area. There's a parking lot for the car off of Highway 17. There you can go along the Coastal Trail. The next cove up just north of Catherine's Cove is Robertson's Cove, which is another great spot, both with their own beach spots. And when I say beach, I want to make sure I paint the right picture. I don't necessarily mean...
We're going to get there, yes.
Yeah.
We're not talking white sand beaches and palm trees here, no.
No, not at all. If anything, expect most beaches to have pebbly sand. There are some white sand beaches, but those are rarities in Lake Superior and definitely hard to find. Most of the beaches, just due to the geology of the region, the Canadian Shield, Lake Superior is the most northern lake of the Great Lakes. It's also the biggest and deepest. 80% of the Great Lakes water comes from Lake Superior. So if you took the water of Lake Superior, it could fill up the rest of the Great Lakes combined. So with that, when the glaciers receded, this area, the north shore of Lake Superior, is the last of everything to go through that geological timescale. So a lot of the beaches are going to have the least fine sands. They're going to be a little bit more pebbly. It's going to be a little bit more rocky, but definitely still enjoyable. I just recommend if maybe wear some water shoes if you're navigating some more rockier terrain, but the beaches are really lovely. It's crystal clear water, super refreshing, cold, but very refreshing on a hot summer day. So these beaches at Catherine's Cove and Robertson's Cove, you'll honestly probably be laying out on these giant rock boulders, which is really nice to sunbathe on and relax. And you may find some patches here and there with this more pebbly, rocky beaches. But most of the time, you'll be jumping off rock cliffs these big Canadian Shield granites, and hanging out there.
Okay.
Another spot I will also mention that's along the coastal trail is Sinclair Cove, which is another cove not too far from the visitor center in the southern part of the coastal trail. This one is interesting because it's changed over the past few years. So when I was there about 10 years ago, there's a really fascinating Ojibwe and First Nation pictographs. So these are on rock bluffs on the side of Lake Superior. They're really beautiful ancient drawings of symbols and of Native American mythology and their stories. One common name and big word that you may hear in this region is Mishbashu, which is the great spirit of Lake Superior. It's described as part lynx, part serpent, but it looks like a cat with a spiny tail. And they call it the Great Lynx of Lake Superior. And it's considered the guardian of Lake Superior and the spirit of the lake. You see a picture of it?
Yeah, I was looking at it. I thought it looked like a dragon, honestly.
It does have dragon-like qualities. That's very fair. But yeah, it's considered the Great Lynx. And part of the lore of Mishbashu is that when the storms are brewing across Lake Superior and you have some of these strong winds and big waves, it's the spirit of Mishbashu hitting its tail on Lake Superior. And again, you'll see common themes throughout some of these spots on this area of Ojibwe lore. If it's Mishbashu, or later on we'll talk about the sleeping giant, but they're a big part of it.
I was looking at the Agawa rock pictographs, which are only 98 feet off of the parking lots.
Exactly. So those are the lakes, in the park. The Agawa pictographs are a really great thing to see. And I will say, so when I came back to the park this past summer, about a month ago, I was talking to the park ranger because I wanted to go see it. And she was letting me know that they've actually discouraged people from going to that area. In order to help mend relations with the local First Nation tribes, they are now respecting it as a cultural and religious site for those people. So there used to be metal chains you can hold on to because it's a dangerous area along the shore with steep and slippery rocks. They removed those chains. They've removed any imagery of it or knowledge of it on the maps. It's still there, and it's something you can learn about at the visitor center. But out of respect to the First Nation, they are now leaving it as a religious site for the local First Nations to visit. You can find more information at the visitor center, but as of recently, it's no longer a place that's encouraged to go.
Okay.
So I'll quickly touch upon just one last way to experience the park. So we said there's plenty of day hike opportunities. There's the Coastal Trail, which is a really beautiful spot that will take about 5 to 7 days to do. And the last option is canoeing. The park itself has a lot of inland lakes. There are 2 big lakes that are popular canoeing routes. They're very difficult to say and spell, so I will try my best. One is Mijitamumshing, which here I will.
All right.
Did you
we'll
find
put
it?
a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. It's a fun one when you're driving, you see that sign, and we used to ask each other, hey, as the sign's coming up, you're driving 50 miles per hour, you have quick 3 seconds to read it, how you pronounce it. And the variety of pronunciations is always fun to hear. But yeah, it's Lake Mijitamumshing and Lake Gamatagama. They are 2 lake systems with a connected canoeing route. It could take you about 2 or 3 days to do the full canoeing route. There are portages, so there are points where you have to carry your canoe from lake to lake or river to river. But it's really beautiful, quiet wilderness.
Okay.
So that's Lake Superior Provincial Park. Depending how much time you have and you want to spend there, you can either spend the night in the park itself, or you carry on to the next town over, which is Wawa. Wawa is on the quote-unquote bigger side for this stretch of Canada. It's about 2,500, 3,000 people. It's an old mining town where mining and lumber was the big industry. It's no longer the case anymore. You'll find a lot of these towns, albeit very charming, they're going through a little bit of a redevelopment phase, as in the industry that they were built on is no longer as popular. They're becoming more built up for tourism and local hiking, camping, and fishing in this area. So Wawa is a great spot to stop. If you are going to stay there, a place that I can recommend is the Northern Lights Hotel, which is just about 10 miles north of Wawa along Highway 17. This is a great spot because it's not in the heart of town. You're still off the highway, but in the woods a little bit. It's a really charming small motel. The owners are super nice. I think recently, about a year or 2 ago, it was bought by a South Asian family. So if you want really good Indian food, you wouldn't expect it to have it in Wawa, Ontario, but they do cook some really good food that I've had up there at that hotel. So Wawa means goose in Ojibwe. So when you
Okay, I was
pull
wondering.
yeah, and some people might connect the dots that the popular East Coast convenience store chain Wawa in America is the symbol is a goose because it comes from that word.
Oh,
Yeah,
I did
exactly.
not know that. I am only vaguely familiar with Wawa. We don't have them here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that comes from the same thing. Every town along Highway 17 has their own little appeal and a
So
little
they
gimmick.
have a goose sculpture.
So
Got it.
exactly. So Wawa's is the goose. So there's a big goose sculpture when you pull into town with a visitor center with some really great information about some local people that have lived there, famous historical sites in the history of the region. Along there as well, there's a local artist in Wawa named Spike Mills who does these statues called gichigumis that are pretty tough to describe. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. They're a little tough to describe. I would say they're a take on tiki heads. Is that the word, tiki heads? I don't know.
You're talking about from Hawaii.
Yeah, exactly. My interpretation of it is a local take on tiki heads done out of usually a tall log, and they're painted in fun, bright colors with usually big smiles with big teeth. And you'll see his art all over Wawa. At the visitor center, there's a few of them in town at certain shops. I know the local Canadian Tire, which is a popular home hardware store throughout Canada, they have their own gichigumi outside the Canadian Tire in Wawa. So it's a fun little thing to spot. And if Spike is in town, definitely recommend going to his studio. He has one that opens up seasonally in Wawa with some more of his artwork, which is really fun to see. Before you leave Wawa, this is also a great place to, if you want to get some food at a restaurant. There's some local cuisine. Poutine is really big. Crazy Fries is a food truck in Wawa that serves great poutine that I would recommend. Other local specialties. This area in Canada is known for fishing. Walleye, perch. I'm not a big fisher myself, so I don't know all the fish that are out there, but it's a big fishing area, so you can get some local fish, some fish and chips, things like that you can find in Wawa as well.
Okay.
And then one other place in Wawa I'll mention is Young's General Store. It's a fun little shop, little roadside attraction where you can get a bunch of unique general store items. They have ice cream there, which is great. They have pickles and jerky and those staples that you imagine exploring small towns on the way of a road trip. And they also have a replica of the goose, which you will find many geese in Wawa statues here and there and on side and with logos. So they also have another goose for their outside Young's General Store.
Okay.
So then just outside of Wawa as well is Michpekaten, which is a First Nation outpost just down the road, maybe about 15, 20 minutes from Wawa. And there are two great spots that I really recommend people to check out. So one is the Magpie High Falls. These are pretty impressive waterfalls, in my opinion, that flow from the area of Wawa all the way down to Lake Superior. So there's the Magpie High Falls, which are really impressive and very accessible. You can just pull over into your car and take an overlook view of the falls itself. And then Silver Falls, which is on the lower end, which is right inside the outpost of Michpekaten, which is not as impressive, but still really amazing to see. So definitely recommend checking out those waterfalls. Really accessible, really beautiful. There's also a sandy beach nearby that you can go and if you want to have a beach day on Lake Superior, which is really great. The second thing I really want to call out for the Michpekaten area is a place called Naturally Superior Adventures. So this place, it feels a little bit like this little hidden gem of a lodge in the middle of nowhere. It's at the tip end of Michpekaten, out right on Lake Superior. And it's a lodge, a bed and breakfast that does canoeing, kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, Voyager canoes.
Yeah, they're really big multi-person canoes.
Exactly. So if you have a group of 20 people, you can all be in one big Voyager canoe. And they lead trips either for a couple of days along Lake Superior, or you can do day trips or a day of kayaking or stand-up paddleboarding out there. They're really friendly people. They're great guides. We've done a trip through them through my summer camp, and we've had a guide with them, and definitely would recommend them. And I think they offer full packages. So you can get them to bring the food, the tents, all the equipment, and they can take out a trip for you. I also recommend staying there if you can. Make sure you book it in advance because they only have a limited amount of rooms. But it's a really beautiful spot, really quiet, remote part where you can experience Lake Superior and the nature around there. with still in a very quaint, comfortable bed and breakfast experience.
Okay.
Moving on from Wawa, you're going to take a turn inland a little bit, and you're going to leave the shore of Lake Superior, and you're going to do a stretch that's deep in the Canadian wilderness. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I was told that Canada has an unknown amount of lakes. There are just so many lakes in this area that no one can count how many there are. And as someone who's canoed and been on those waters, I think it's very true, because the boundaries of what one lake starts and the other one ends is very confusing. So you'll be driving through and you'll see lakes left and right all over the place, which is really beautiful, this part. There used to be a provincial park called Opatanga that unfortunately is closed down, but it's still a protected preserve. And that's a great spot if you want to try some fishing, some canoeing on some of these inland lakes of this northern part of Canada. Throughout this stretch of the highway, you may see some lodges or pullover sites that people go for fishing to get bait or gear. But again, keep in mind that a lot of these stretches, especially this part where you're going from Wawa to the next town of White River, you're not going to have gas stations really, not many spots to find a town. So just be prepared for that when you're driving.
Okay.
The next town I'll quickly just mention is White River. Wawa has the goose. White River's claim to fame is they are the home to Winnie the Pooh, which surprises a lot of people. But the story is that in 1914, a Canadian soldier, Harry Colburn, purchased a black bear from White River for $20. And he named the bear after his hometown of Winnipeg, which is Winnie. That's how he got the name Winnie. So he purchased the bear in White River and named it after his hometown of Winnipeg and named the bear Winnie, therefore Winnie the Pooh. And they traveled to England, where Winnie became a mascot. And when Harry was deployed to France, I think during World War I want to say, he left a Winnie at the London Zoo. And then that's where Winnie became this mascot and an icon of the area, and later became the inspiration for the famous children's story, Winnie the Pooh. So White River loves that claim to fame that they are the home of Winnie the Pooh. So when you go to White River, you'll see a Winnie the Pooh statue and a little Winnie the Pooh park. So it's a fun little roadside attraction there.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
Hello, Finney. Did you think our story was over?
Just the grammar.
This Friday,
You're dead.
Dead is just a word.
critics are saying Ethan Hawke is pure nightmare fuel.
Finney.
Discover the secret behind the mask.
What do you think happens when you die? It's time to find out.
Black Phone 2, only in theaters Friday. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
Continuing on Highway 17, the next main spot you're going to hit is Puckasaw National Park, which is just outside of the biggest town, as I mentioned, between Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay that you'll experience, of a massive 3,000 people, is Marathon. Marathon used to be a pulp and paper town, but has now become the gateway into Puckasaw National Park. I think what surprised me at first is I would assume that if it's a national park, usually it's more popular with people, it's more accessible, it has more things to do. But honestly, Puckasaw is much more remote and rustic. It doesn't have as many day hike options as Lake Superior Provincial Park. And it's only one access point from the highway. So if you are doing a backcountry in Puckasaw, you're just going all the way down and then all the way back up. So That's why I would recommend, if you want to get a real good camping, hiking experience, spend more time in Lake Superior Provincial Park. You'll have a much wider range of things to do, and the park itself is a lot more accessible. But it's still definitely worthwhile to see. There's a big suspension bridge called the White River Suspension Bridge, which you can go on a hike across as part of a day hike in Puckasaw. Hattie Cove is the main base for people who want to do front country camping or do some day hikes. So check out Puckasaw National Park to do some day hiking and see that suspension bridge and some of the sites on Lake Superior.
Okay.
This is a good time to also mention that this is bear country throughout all of Canada. So definitely just be prepared and be a little mindful when it comes to packing out your food. If you are doing backcountry camping, make sure that you're bear bagging it and just being safe. So definitely recommend people just to be aware when they do some camping and hiking, that be mindful of bears.
Okay.
So then after Pakistan National Park, you're going through the stretch of Lake Superior until you reach Thunder Bay, which has a few different small towns that I can quickly mention a few that are great to see. Nays Provincial Park is a really interesting place. It's a smaller provincial park, but it used to be the home of a German POW camp during World War II that the Canads used to house German POWs. So there's some really fascinating history there. Terrace Bay is another great town that has a replica of a lighthouse you can climb up and experience what a lighthouse is like along the shore of Lake Superior. There's a bunch of rivers and waterfalls with beautiful overlooks. One that's really cool to check out is, and I apologize for my pronunciation, but Agua Sabon Falls and Gorge. So this is a really narrow chute of a gorge canyon that is controlled by a hydroelectric station. So you may visit and there won't be much water trickling, but then suddenly they may release water as part of the dam system, and then water will be rushing out. And you'll see a few spots like that along Highway 17, which is a pretty cool thing to see. And if you're lucky enough to see when they let the water rushing, it's a really wonderful sight to have. The final stop and region of the road trip is going to be around Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay is, I think, the largest town on Lake Superior. It has 100 to 200,000 people. And there's some really amazing spots in the Thunder Bay area. So I'd recommend spending around 3 days in Thunder Bay. I would spend at least one of those days at Sleeping Giant Provincial Park. So Sleeping Giant is one of my favorite spots in this entire area. If there's two places I highly recommend people to check out, it's Sleeping Giant Provincial Park and Lake Superior Provincial Park. Sleeping Giant is this peninsula that sticks out into Lake Superior, and it's called Sleeping Giant because when you look at it, especially on the shore in Thunder Bay, it looks like a sleeping giant.
Okay. There's it looks like a mesa-like rock formation that's supposed to be the sleeping giant. Okay.
Exactly. So this region by Thunder Bay, there are the mountains called the Nor'westers, which are, the best way to describe it is, it's like a mesa-looking formation. It looks like a mountain with a top chopped off, and it's like a plateau. So the sleeping giant is exactly that. It's basically this mountaintop with a flat top, and it looks like the shape of a sleeping giant. There's a local Ojibwe story that the sleeping giant was the protector of a lot of the natural resources and silver in the region, and he always discouraged the local tribe from disclosing information to the Europeans. And the story goes that when the local tribe disobeyed the order of sleeping giant and showed the Europeans the local resources, the sleeping giant fell into a slumber, laying down on his back and guarding the region forever, and is a protector of that space. In Sleeping Giant Provincial Park, you can hike up to the top of the giant and get great views overlooking Lake Superior. I will say, if you have a fear of heights, it can be a little bit dicey because the end of the trail, you are basically looking at a straight 90-degree vertical drop into Lake Superior. But it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a really great spot. In the park as well, another great spot is the Sea Lion. So this is a rock formation out on Lake Superior that used to look like more of a lion, but in the 1930s it eroded and now it lost its head. So you can see what it looks like online, pictures of what the sea lion used to look like in the 30s. But now it's half of a lion shape, but still really unique and really beautiful rock formation, this thin rock sheet that sticks out into Lake Superior. The other absolutely beautiful spot in the Thunder Bay area that I definitely recommend people to see is Ouimet Canyon. So that's spelled Ouimet. And this is a canyon that's a 150-meter gorge. It's a very accessible spot. You can just pull up with your car and do a short little walk, and you can take a look over this giant, beautiful gorge in the woods. There's another canyon close by called Eagle Canyon, which is a similar gorge. I haven't personally been there, but I know that it has the largest foot suspension bridge in all of Canada. That's 600 feet long that goes across the gorge. So it could definitely be really worthwhile to check out. And then before we talk about Thunder Bay itself as a town, another great nature spot by Sleeping Giant Provincial Park.
And I have to say, I think I got vertigo just from looking at a picture of this suspension bridge.
Yes. In spirit with
and I've been on the one outside Vancouver. I've been on a long suspension bridge in Canada, but Yeah.
If you haven't been to the longest in all of Canada.
I haven't been the longest in all of Canada.
Yeah, I will also note that just like Sleeping Giant Provincial Park, if you have a fear of heights, definitely be cautioned with that hike because you're 600 feet of length of a bridge that you're suspended over this canyon.
And it will be bouncy.
And it will be bouncy, yes.
Yeah.
Another spot is Silver Islet, which was an old silver mine right near the Sleeping Giant Provincial Park. And now that's all that left is a general store that's a tourist attraction to visit. But what's really cool about it is that if you take a look out on the shore on a clear day, you can see the old mine shaft. There's some really fascinating history about how essentially they built this mine underwater, and it was only open for around 16 years because they just couldn't keep the water out, and it was just too dangerous. So you can still see that abandoned mine shaft in that area. I will also go back a second. If you're into abandoned underwater places, in Lake Superior Provincial Park, there's a place called Gargantua Harbor, which is about 40 miles down a dirt road off of Highway 17. And in Gargantua Harbor, there is a sunken ship that you can see if you kayak out there. It's not too far from the shore. And it's an old steam tugboat that's about 130 feet long called the Columbus, and it sank in 1909, which is not too far off from the shore. So you can kayak out there and you can look on over and see the actual full shipwreck, which is a pretty cool sight to see.
Cool.
The final stop in Thunder Bay, I'd recommend checking out the town. There's a lot of cool cultural sites in the area. There's Fort Williams, which is an old fort, part of the Northwest Company that used to be part of the Canadian Fur Trade Association in, I think it was around 1815. So you can go visit that fort, and they have reenactors, and you can see what it was like to live during that time and explore the fort, which is definitely worthwhile. Another great spot just outside of town is Kakabeka Falls, which is actually, again, the names, you're definitely going to not pronounce it right the first time, but the locals will be more than happy to help you. They're all very nice Canadians. But it's about 131 feet tall waterfall. It's the second tallest waterfall in all of Canada, second to Niagara Falls. And they're really impressive to see. Again, really easy to get to. And there's a car parking lot you can pull over to and a short trail that shows you the waterfalls. Another spot that has very interesting Ojibwe history. There's a story of a local princess who was part of the Ojibwe tribe. And when this neighboring Sioux tribe was trying to invade and attack the Ojibwe tribe, the story goes is that she led the Sioux tribe to what they were thinking to her local village, when in reality, she was leading them over the falls, sacrificing herself in order to save her village and killing everyone in that boat. So it has a little bit of a significant cultural and spiritual significance to the local First Nation, and is an absolutely beautiful place I definitely recommend to check out.
Okay.
And then Thunder Bay itself is a very lovely town. I haven't done too much exploring of the town itself, but it's a great spot for breweries and a restaurant scene. It's a town that used to be more industrial, that's had a resurgence, like a lot of other Rust Belt towns across the Midwest, of arts and food and breweries. So definitely worthwhile to check out the town too. Another piece I'll mention around Thunder Bay that's really nice is the Terry Fox National Historical Monument. Are you familiar with Terry Fox? Does that name ring a bell?
I am not.
Okay. I wasn't familiar myself either, but he's a big Canadian icon. And the story of Terry Fox, that he was in his 20s and he was diagnosed with cancer and lost a leg. And in order to raise awareness for cancer, he decided to run across all of Canada. And he called it a Marathon of Hope. And in the middle of his journey, just outside Thunder Bay, he started getting sick again and his cancer returned. And he ultimately passed away before having to actually finish the full journey they had planned. And he's considered a big hero in that area of Canada. And where he had to end his journey short is just outside Thunder Bay, and they have a monument dedicated to him, which is definitely worthwhile seeing and very fascinating to learn about his life and his story and how important it is to the people in that area. So that pretty much wraps up the road trip that I would suggest for people to do. I think the beauty of ending in Thunder Bay is that you have options to continue the trip further if you want to extend. The stretch of Lake Superior between Duluth, Minnesota and Thunder Bay is supposed to be some of the most beautiful spots in all of Lake Superior. You're continuing through the Northwestern Mountains. In the Minnesota side, there's something called Split Rock Lighthouse, which is a beautiful lighthouse on top of a cliff. There's the
And
Palisades
we
Head.
actually talk about that area on the episode on Duluth. So if you want to extend this trip, you can extend it either by listening to the episode on Duluth that will cover that part of Lake Superior, or by looking at the episode on Michigan's Upper Peninsula, which will extend from Sault Ste. Marie's.
Okay, perfect. So then I will stop right there, and I will let people, if they want to continue their trip from this road trip, to go on to that podcast and let that be the guide for that region, because I hear only amazing things about it. I haven't done it myself, but it's something that's very high on my bucket list.
Excellent. Anything else we should tell people about doing this trip before we get to some of our wrap-up questions?
Yeah, the only thing I will say is that it's a great place if you love nature. So definitely do not be afraid to take your time, pull off the side of the road, see a waterfall, go do a hike. Blueberry patches are everywhere in this area of Canada. The season is around August. So if you want to pick fresh blueberries, there's plenty of places to do it. And they're absolutely delicious when you have an actual blueberry straight from the bush. Thimbleberries are really big as well. So really just enjoy the nature and the beauty and the pristine of it all, because it's a very unique place to take that all in. And I guess the last thing I will say is that jump in Lake Superior. It will be freezing cold and you will tell yourself not to do it when you feel the water with your feet, but it is so refreshing and is arguably is healing. And I definitely recommend to at least take one swim in Lake Superior.
Excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, you are standing in the prettiest spot on this road trip. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I think it has to be Old Woman Bay.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think Old Woman Bay is a great example of the nature in this area. You have beautiful cliffs, dense pine forests, crystal clear blue water. You're really just immersed in all of the nature around you. And every time I drive down Highway 17, especially there's a section of it right before you get to Old Woman Bay heading south. The highway is if it goes straight through the water into the cliffs of Old Woman Bay. And it's just a really beautiful stretch of road and a really beautiful beach.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in this part of Ontario.
I would say the sign that says no gas for 150 kilometers. It really makes you realize how remote this place really is. And it really makes you amazed that the communities that live up here and just the remoteness of it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change my answer. I think something that makes me laugh, and I think only in this road trip in Ontario, is driving past the goose of Wawa. It really is an indicator of the spirit and culture of the people in this area and how much pride they take in their small towns or the region they're in. And you will see tourism information hyping up the goose, or in White River, it's Winnie the Pooh, whatever it is. And it's really amazing to see the pride people have in their home. And it makes me laugh because you don't think of a goose statue as something that special significant. But when you're really in the area and you see the passion around it, driving in the middle of the woods for hours, and then you see the statue out of nowhere, it really is something amazing. You get it. It's very cool.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize the region in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
I would say blue, because the richness of the blue water is really something that I've never seen before. Green, with that juxtaposed to the dense pine forests.
I would have put money on you naming blue and green as 2 of your words. Okay.
There you go. And then the third thing I would say is poutine. That you can find anywhere in this area, and it's delicious. And that's one of the common threads throughout all these towns, is no matter where you go in this area of Canada, you can find poutine on the menu.
Excellent. Our guest again has been David Adler. And David, you have a YouTube channel. I'm going to let you say the name of it.
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is just my name, David Adler, but you can search on YouTube for Dadler701. That's Dadler 701, and my channel should come up there. A lot of the videos I post are just mostly for my friends and family to check out the travels that I do. I have quite a few videos of my journeys to Japan, where I speak Japanese and have been able to explore some off the beaten path places. So definitely recommend check that out if you have a trip to Japan coming up and you want to see more.
Excellent. Do you have any videos on Lake Superior?
I do not, but I do plan
Okay.
on making some. But this is a good inspiration coming out of this podcast to make a video on Lake Superior.
And this won't come out for a couple months, so you got some time here.
Okay. I probably won't make it before that, but I do not have a video on Lake Superior, unfortunately.
Excellent. David, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for this part of Ontario.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit purina.com/purple to learn more.
Hey, the vibes are slipping. I think it's time to bring out the Velveeta shells and cheese. The holidays are a time to go all in on indulgence. Headline your meals with the rich, creamy meltiness of Velveeta shells and cheese and satisfy your holiday cravings like no other. Bring that main course energy to your side dish. Celebrate extra with Velveeta these holidays.
Thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. This is my day job now, and I appreciate them. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. Nothing new on the Amateur Traveler blog this week because I was traveling in Kansas, as those of you on the newsletter already know, because I already sent off some information about my trip there, but I will be talking about it more on the show, although I hadn't originally planned to. But it was an interesting trip. I was at the TBEX conference in Wichita, which is a travel blogging conference, and I happened to win the Travel Creator Award for the best travel podcast for the second year in a row while I was there. So cool. That's fun. Speaking of interesting trips, if you want to come with me to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan in May of 2026, then go to amateurtraveler.com/trips to learn more, or just drop me an email and I'll send you the information. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.